This episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast is brought to you by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com, and also brought to you by Green Oak Accounting, GreenOakAccounting.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 153 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, my friends. Glad you've joined me for the podcast. Hope you're doing well here as we are starting into the month of November. And, it's, hopefully the election is behind us now, and we know the results as I'm recording this. We're still unsure. But anyway, maybe by the time this comes out, we'll know for sure what's going to be happening. But anyway, I hope you're faring well. I know it's been an interesting year, and, we're winding down towards the holiday season, which, it's going to be different. Again, it's 2020 is going to go down as just the different year. It'll be interesting to see what we call this year, in years to come, what we'll refer to it as. It's the great something or another. So anyway, I hope you're doing well, and I'm glad you joined me for the podcast. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. And if you're coming back for more, I hope you will take time to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. So I'm real excited for you to hear my guest today, Kathryn Esquer, and she is another one of those great people that reached out to me. And when I found out about what she is doing with the Teletherapist Network, is something that she started just back in July, and I think you're going to really love what she's doing. Really giving people a way to do some supervision and some consultation, given all that we're going through in this COVID pandemic and the switch to teletherapy or telehealth or whatever we want to call that, online therapy or whatever. But she built this network out of her own desire to really try to connect with people, to find out about best practices and just to be able to connect with others in that way, in a very confidential and secure way, and also just being able to do it in a way that just keeps our professional standards up. So I'm looking forward to you hearing from Kathryn and learning more about what she's put together through the Teletherapist Network. But before we get to Kathryn, I wanted to let you know that one of the things that I'm still working on with my friend Dr. David Hall, we're pulling it all together, and that is the Group Practice Outfitter. And if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/group practice outfitter, you can get your name on the wait list, or at least the list, to be able to be notified when we release the next cohort of this. It's going to be coming out pretty soon. We're putting together, getting everything loaded on our Teachable platform so that it's ready, and you can jump in on that. It's going to be it's going to be really helpful for people. I know that we did the launch, the beta group, a few weeks ago, and we just had a great response with that. We kept the group small. It was only about 10 people in the group, and we just did a deep dive into what it means to start a group practice and just all the nuts and bolts around that. So go check that out, practiceoftherapy.com/group practice outfitter, to learn more about that. And also just to say, be sure and check out our resources pages. If you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com and just click on the button there at the top that says Cool Resources, I'm constantly adding to that, and I think you'll just find a lot of things there that might be helpful to you in your practice. One experience I'll share with you here real quickly before we get to Kathryn is went through some changes with my website, with the Practice of Therapy website. I was noticing that it was getting slower and we were just having some trouble on the back end. And so I talked to my friend Daniel Fava, who you've heard here on the Practice of Therapy podcast, and he has his own podcast called Private Practice Elevation Podcast. And I've been on that podcast and he's been on this podcast. And so again, one of those good colleagues that we share podcasting things. But Daniel's expertise is just in building WordPress websites, and he teaches therapists how to build their own and that sort of thing. So when I started running into those problems, he was kind of my go-to person to figure out what was going on, and realized that part of the problem is the hosting service that I used just really wasn't providing the service that I needed. So he recommended to me a service called Flywheel. And I'll have some links here in the show notes about Flywheel. But I tell you, it was one of those experiences that I was dreading it and just did not look forward to transitioning and what they call it, the term is migration of your hosting or whatever. But they were so great in helping me move my hosting over to their service. And it's really saving me some money in the long run, because my previous hosting service was just kind of nickel and diming me on just kind of what they were providing. But this is just an all-in-one thing. And I spent time on a Zoom call with them, not only on the front end side with just really kind of having to make the decision about if I wanted to switch over, but also on the tech side where they just walked me through it, and it was so easy, and I was just so impressed with their services. So I've got to give them a plug here. And if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/flywheel, you can learn more about them. Now, that is an affiliate link. So if you choose to purchase from them, I do get a commission at no extra cost to you, but that's one of the ways in which I pay for and support the podcast here. But anyway, if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/flywheel, you can find out more about them and just about web hosting and all of that sort of thing. Not to get too technical here. But anyway, just wanted to let you know about that because it was just kind of a great find for me, and just like to share those great experiences that I have. So anyway, before we get to Kathryn, one more thing. I'd like to invite you to go over and check out TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers, and they're who I use in my practice, and so couldn't do without them. So be sure and check them out, therapynotes.com. And if you'll use the coupon code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get 2 months of their services for free, just to give them a try. So be sure and check them out. And the other thing too that they've got is a telehealth portal that is built into their electronic health record system. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that here in this podcast, not that platform specifically, but just about the switch to telehealth or teletherapy. So anyway, check them out, therapynotes.com. And also be sure and check out our other sponsor for this particular podcast episode, and that is Green Oak Accounting, greenoakaccounting.com. And be sure and talk to Julie and her team, and they'll do a free consultation with you to help you figure out the whole financial side of your practice. Again, they are wonderful people. Julie was on the previous episode of the podcast, and we talked, it was a reverse interview. So if you haven't listened to the episode, be sure and go back and listen to that particular episode. So without further ado, here's my friend Kathryn Esquer. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so excited for you to meet Kathryn Esquer. And Kathryn, in just a little bit that we've been chatting, I know you're going to love her as much as I do. But we're going to talk about something that she has started, which I'm real excited about, the Teletherapist Network that she has just launched within the last several months. So, but Kathryn, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited. Longtime listener, thrilled to be here.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's always good to connect in this way. And as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your private practice journey and how you've kind of landed where you landed?
Yeah, that's such a great question because everyone's private practice journey is so different. Anyone who knew me in grad school knew that I did not see myself in private practice or actually even in the clinical fields. I did get my doctorate in clinical psychology, but I also did a dual degree where I got my MBA. So it set us graduates up well for going into organizational consulting, leadership development, and coaching. And I did do that for a little bit. But when it was time my husband and I talked about having kids and settling down, the travel and the long hours weren't something that I saw in my life. I saw it in my career and I loved it. But I started to look at my life as in a bigger picture. And so that's something I'm really passionate about is working with my own clients on what do you want your life to look like, not just your career. So I realized that a little later and I went back and did another residency in clinical psych so that I could become licensed. And after my residency, my postdoc, my husband and I relocated we were in some metropolitan areas in Florida and Pennsylvania. And we chose to relocate to my hometown in very rural Pennsylvania. And part of the reason we did that is because I couldn't imagine having kids or raising a family away from my family. So my husband graciously went with me. He's not from Pennsylvania. And secondly, because my hometown, growing up, I knew this all too well, that it was a mental health drought. We did not have a lot of mental health providers. And growing up, my family's in the medical community in my hometown. Growing up in that, not in the mental health community, I knew that I could really bring something great and give back to my hometown. And I was really passionate about it. Everyone knows I love where I grew up. I needed to get out for about 10 years, but I'm thrilled to be back and to be giving back. Working with the people that, made my community what it was and a great place to grow up. So I'm really passionate about rural mental health and bringing services to those areas. And that's kind of how I ended up in private practice back in my hometown. It has its own set of unique ethical dilemmas and issues, but I can't picture myself anywhere else right now.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And I that resonates for me because where I'm located with my own practice is we are a very small kind of metropolitan area surrounded by a large rural area that actually encompasses 3 states total. I mean, we've got, where we're located, we get folks out of Virginia and Kentucky up here in Northeast Tennessee. But you're right, there's such a mental health drought. And I love the fact that you've got a passion for that because it's, fortunately, I think we're starting to begin to beat some of the stigma about mental health within rural communities. And I think people are recognizing that. So it's awesome. The other thing that just is really awesome to me is the fact that you've got an MBA. I think that's, I think maybe I've only met one other therapist type clinical person that has any sort of business background.
Yeah.
So that just brings a lot to the table. But so, and I guess what I'm really wanting you to tell folks about is this new thing you started, the Teletherapist Network, and just your passion around that and, your thinking and your reasoning behind all of that.
Sure. So I'll share you, how about a little bit about the journey of how it came to be?
Yes, sure.
So working in private practice, I work out of a primary care office. So I do have colleagues. I have nurses and physicians and nurse practitioners that I work alongside of. but no one else there is in mental health. And when COVID hit, we all had our own struggles. They kept their practice running. They continued to see patients remotely, but also in office as they needed to. I have a lot of respect for the primary care teams on the front line during the COVID. And I went back to my house to do all of my therapy work just overnight, went from in-person to teletherapy overnight. And I realized that even though I felt very competent in my clinical work, I was feeling very professionally isolated and really uninspired. I didn't have that set of peers or people who were in the mental health trenches with me going through this big transition together. And so, being a problem solver, I started to look to my existing communities. Where can I find people to connect with? My own community, a little, rural, isolated. There weren't a lot of mental health practitioners that I could connect with, but the few I did, it was valuable. I reached out to my graduate school friends, and that was valuable too. It was great to hear from them and connect with them, but not many of them were in a very similar situation as I was. We all went into our different specialties after graduate school. So the number of people in private practice was even smaller. So I looked to APA and all the different, I'm on the National Register of Health Service Psychologists. I looked to those listservs, and they had wonderful resources, really great resources for telehealth and how to transition. But what I found myself missing was the daily interactions, the daily, I kind of relate it back to, if you can remember in graduate school, in between classes or in the lunchroom, hey, how are you? How was your kid's birthday? And also, I'm struggling with this patient. Do you know of any resources? I really miss that informal but professional daily interactions. And so, email listservs were clogging my inbox and I was getting lost, and they were a bit too impersonal for me. Facebook groups were great, and I did find some, but I'm an extremely private person. So I didn't feel comfortable connecting with people in that public of a forum. So I decided to, on spur of the moment, with the support of my family, who's probably sick of hearing me talk about it, create the Teletherapist Network. And what we just aim to do is connect the modern therapist, the therapist who is out there in private practice, who doesn't want to become isolated or practicing in a silo, who wants to stay up to date on all the best research and all the best clinical resources, but also recognizes the power of crowdsourcing and the power of peers. We could do all the work ourselves, but why not pull together so we could do it together and save ourselves the time and save ourselves the energy so that we can care for ourselves and we can better care for our patients. So, we are a group of licensed clinicians. Most of us are in the US, but we have a bunch of international clinicians, and we collaborate and consult on an individual level as well as a group level daily. And we support each other, especially going through what we're going through right now with the political climate. It's been a really rewarding experience to have created it. And, it started because I needed it. So that's my passion project.
Right. Wow. That's great. And it was, and what's amazing to me is that it was really just started in July, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic and all that's going on with that. So, so what are kind of the, I guess maybe the nuts and bolts of the platform and how it operates and that sort of thing?
That's a great question. So our community, the Teletherapist Network, is hosted on a Mighty Network community. So Mighty Networks, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it is a platform that basically does all the technical stuff for you. So I could have paid to have someone create an app for me, but Mighty Networks puts all of their time and energy to creating a community-based app, and then we as the customers pay to use their app, and we customize it to our use. So if you're familiar with Mighty Networks, we're on that. If you're not familiar with Mighty Networks, highly recommend you check them out. There's some other great communities on there for different specialty interest groups. But we on a weekly basis, we do mindfulness exercises and questions. We consult with each other. We have live consultations every other week online via Zoom, organized through the platform. Every week, we also highlight a new member. And that's probably my favorite part because we get to know each other on a really deep level. I interview them and we post their information, and then people just get to pick their brain all day. It's not synchronous, it's asynchronous, but people ask questions about, hey, how are you transitioning EMDR online? Or where do you find the best training for persistent depressive disorders? Or anything that their specialty is and they can bring to the group, we get to benefit from. We get to, harness the collective knowledge of all of these peers. So it's been so rewarding. And we have a lot of big stuff coming up. We have guest expert webinars coming in every month where we have, industry professionals or services for mental health clinicians. They come in and they teach us something new every month. Wow. And it's been a really neat way to connect with other people who want to help us, right? So it's made me in my own private practice gone from feeling, again, very uninspired. And I loved the work, but uninspired in terms of really wanting to better myself as a clinician to really feeling supported and motivated to get out there and learn more things and make it easy to do so.
Right. I love that because I know that has been just even for me in my practice and the transition to teletherapy is just, I'm a marriage and family therapist. So I think about, okay, what are some of the best ways to do marriage therapy using telehealth? And that would be a great question for that group, or just some brainstorming around that. So I love the concept of being able to consult in that way and being able to, bounce things off of people, because you're right. Like you said earlier, or you alluded to earlier, is that, I think, but particularly for people that are solo practitioners, not so much as group practitioners, but in solo practice, it can be very isolating. And now you add on top of that the COVID pandemic, it's just really isolating in what and how you're able to interact with others. So it is. Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what we don't know. And so that's kind of and ignorance is never an excuse. I've tried to get out of speeding tickets that way.
Yes, right.
But it's important for us to stay on top of what's going on. And I don't think it's feasible to put that pressure on ourselves as private practice practitioners that we should be solely responsible for, like, let's harness the power. Like, we can't stay on top of all the listservs and all the journals coming out. Let's collectively come together. Yes. And I'm just shocked that there wasn't anything else out there like that.
Yeah. It's kind of like us, for a lot of us, we would have study groups in grad school and
where I was strong in stats, but not in something else, and we would help each other out. Exactly. That's exactly that's going on.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So what sort of themes maybe are you seeing with kind of the topics that come up for people, given where we are in life?
Well, I mean, when we first started it was a lot of sharing of COVID resources, because a lot of the organizing bodies, APA, ACA, and ASW, they were all coming out with really great COVID resources and telehealth resources. So that started off that. As you can imagine, we are filming this shortly before it comes out. And so we're in the middle of awaiting the political results for the presidency. And that is what most of us have been talking about recently. We were asking questions of each other just this week about what percentage of your caseload talks about politics in the therapy room. And it was well over half of everyone's caseload brings it up. And that kind of led on to another discussion about, hey, do you disclose your political affiliations or beliefs in the therapy room? And if you do, how do you do it? And interestingly enough, no one said yes. Most people said no. And a few said it depends. And so that really highlighted a really interesting conversation about how we should be aware of what we personally bring into the therapy room and keep that in check. And really the best way, and what I would believe the only way to do that, would be to consult with peers and to have those questions being asked of you.
Right.
So obviously there's a lot of political conversations, no fiery debates yet. I think everyone's, really, we're a good group. We respect each other. So.
Right. Yeah. I think it'd be nice to be able to teach those skills just in general, just off on a tangent about being able to have a civil discourse, about
exactly,
political things. So, yeah. Well, that's really interesting. And I think it has been, this whole year in general has just been, we've not only dealt with COVID, but we've also racism came to the forefront in a big way, and just being able to understand that. And, I know that's been a conversation I've had a lot here on the podcast with other therapists, particularly therapists that are African American or people of color, how that's affecting us just internally. And I think that's, again, a theme that I've had here on the podcast a lot lately, is just the whole concept of self-care and what that looks like. Because, as therapists, just on a good day, on normal, pre-COVID, all of that sort of thing, we are dealing with heavy stuff that people kind of put out to us in the therapy room. And so we're having to process that with them, but also how it affects us personally, to hear about, maybe somebody's horrific trauma and, or that sort of thing. So this is just so important what you're doing.
Thank you. It's nice to have that safe group, that private community, to be able to, obviously we don't disclose any confidential information or PHI, but just to be able to disclose, hey, I just sat with a really tough trauma case and I'm coming home and I'm feeling X, Y, or Z. Just having that space to have people who know and feel you on such a deep level. It's one thing to share with our partners, and I think our partners definitely get parts of it, but until you're in that therapy room for client after client, it's really hard to understand what it's like. Yeah.
Have there been any just kind of big aha moments for you as you've heard from other therapists?
I think the biggest aha moment was I'm not alone. And I mean that in the beginning sense of, I'm not alone in feeling isolated or uninspired. And it's a little scary to me to think, I would hope, but I actually think that I don't know if this idea would have come about if the pandemic hadn't shut down in-person services. And that's a little scary to me, to think that I might have gone on my career without having a group like this to be able to check myself with, or to be able to stay on top of new practices or best resources. So I think that when I started it, we had such an overwhelming response. We had over 150 requests to join in the first week that I had to shut it down, because I wanted it to be a really good community, and I was brand new, so I didn't know how to run it effectively. So to have that overwhelming response at first was absolutely incredible, and it made me feel so not alone. That was my biggest aha moment, and it really kind of trickled into that this is so needed in our field. We have amazing organizing bodies, the APA, the ACA, NASW, that help us, advance the field and put so much time and money into research and new protocols and best practices. But we don't have that community of support on an individual level. And I think that's so needed, especially now with, I'm sure that you've noticed this as well, with telehealth and teletherapy becoming so prominent overnight, the barriers to entry to private practice are very low. And so I've seen a lot of clinicians leave group practices and go out on their own because it's not a big risk anymore. There's not overhead.
Right.
And with that, I think we should be talking about, if you do go out on your own, which is a great lifestyle for some people. I love the lifestyle, but you need to make sure it's not in isolation.
Yes. Yes, and also done with some understanding of the business side of it all, and
Yeah.
the financial side of it all, and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But you're right. It's it's going to be interesting to see how maybe even a year from now what becomes the norm for going to therapy. And
I agree. I
yeah.
think that I primarily work with insurance.
Mm-hmm.
My community tends to respond best to that. And it's interesting. I'm hopeful, but it's interesting to know that insurance companies aren't giving us the blank slate or the blank check for telehealth. They're always pushing back the end date. So I'm hopeful that
Mm-hmm.
if insurances can get behind it, which I believe is in their best interest in terms
Mm-hmm.
of their overall cost savings to get people the mental health care, then I can imagine that, widespread, I think it would become the norm.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's, as you mentioned, just the, what it does for those of us in practice and reducing overhead. I've got an office, right now, as I mentioned, we've gone back to pretty much almost 100% telehealth. And some of us come into the office just to get away from home and work from here. But here's a building that sits here that's not
Mm-hmm.
being used to its full capacity, and so
Mm-hmm.
that would be a huge overhead savings if we transitioned out of that. I don't know. I like my building. I don't know that I want to get rid of it, but yeah. So
I think having the option there is good. I hope the option is permanent. I don't think it's the best for everyone, obviously, or every client. That is, you always have to do what's in the best interest of the client,
right.
but having the option for people can so reduce the cost to entry for the clients into therapy. I mean, even in my own rural community, we can now do telehealth with other, clinicians or experts in different fields who my clients would not have had access to otherwise.
Right.
So I hope the option stays.
Yeah. I think I hope it will too. And as I mentioned in where we're located, we have folks. I've had clients that would travel as far as 2 hours just to come see us because they just didn't have any other options, and we were the closest one. And so, being able to see them in the office and that sort of thing. And the other interesting thing that I think is going to happen is, hopefully, this is going to be some push for licensure portability,
yes.
Of being able to make things much more universal, which I think is definitely needed.
So needed. That's a big conversation. We have a referral directory on the network, and that's something that a lot of the members engage in, where they have clients moving across state, or they have a client who needs a referral in a different state. And since we have members in most of the states, it's easy to be able to find those, because otherwise, I found myself having clients move. I'm making almost blind referrals going off Psychology Today.
Right.
And that's not a best practice by any means.
Right.
So now you can connect, with the clinicians to see if their expertise matches what the client's looking for. Right. So hopefully that will, not be needed. But right now, I think it's important to be able to connect.
Sure. Okay. So tell folks about the Teletherapy Network and how they can sign up and find out more about it and join and all that kind of thing.
Yes, I would love to. So, as I mentioned earlier, I am such a longtime listener of the practice of therapy. I would love to give your fellow community members a free 2-week trial to join us on the network and try us out and see if it works for your practice. So if they could just go to www.teletherapistnetwork, all one word, .com/Gordon. And the page will be there for you to join us for 2 weeks for free. We would love to see you on the network. And even if it's not for you, totally fine. But make sure you find those peers to consult with and to have your group, have your tribe.
Right. Yeah. And that's so important. And we'll be sure to have this in the show notes. And in the show summary, the links there. And also this will be on, I'll make sure, Kathryn, that we get this on our resources page as well.
That'd be great.
So we've got it there as well. So yeah, so be sure and check it out with, I think this is one of the things that I know I was just going to comment on was the importance of, whether you're just starting in private practice or whether you've been in it a while, it's so important to have those mentors and coaches and people and guides that can guide you along the way, number one, but also give you a bit of accountability to some degree in terms of kind of holding your feet to the fire when you need to in order to be more successful. And and you don't have to be isolated.
No, not at all. In fact, we have a lot of clinicians who build their private practices just off of, the advice and guidance and other people's experiences. You don't have to do it all yourself. You're not supposed to do it all yourself.
Right. So, well, Kathryn, I know that we could probably spend hours talking about these things, and I'm so excited to be able to find out about what you've started and what you're doing with the Teletherapist Network. And so tell folks again how they can get in touch with you or if they have more questions. And
that would be great. The best way to find me would be on Instagram. I'm the teletherapist.network on Instagram, or you can email me at Kathryn, that's KATHRYN, at teletherapistnetwork.com. And I would love to connect with you. I am such a social person that this quarantine is not sitting so well with me. So I would love to connect with you.
Right. And again, we'll have this in the show summary and so show notes. Well, Kathryn, I hope to be able to get you back on the podcast again. This was great. And I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And I would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, take care.
Bye.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed listening in on my conversation with Kathryn as much as I enjoyed having the conversation. She was just a delight to get to know. And be sure and check out the Teletherapist Network, and that's teletherapistnetwork.com. It's just amazing what people are doing, and I just love the creativity that I'm hearing about. And, the fact that she is taken this passion of hers and really turned it into something that is not only feeding her passion, but also is benefiting others, I think is just a wonderful thing to do. And I would encourage you to do that as well. Just really thinking about, how can you expand what you do outside the therapy room? Because I think there are so many of you out there that are talented people, and you've got some great ideas. And I think that's really how we, for lack of a better term, share the love with one another. And just being able to share our talents and our gifts, and just being able to learn from each other. And that's something that I know is just becoming more and more important to me, is just to be able to collaborate and to be able to hear from others. I think there's been, over the last several years, not to get too far off on a tangent here, but we've just become so polarized and so isolated from each other, and just choosing sides and having to choose sides and all of that. And I think there's just a better way with just learning to collaborate and learning to hear from each other. And as I know Kathryn talked about, just with the groups that are being started and some of the networking that is occurring there, for people to be able to talk about those hard things like politics that has just been, this year in particular, has just been so, abrasive to some degree, regardless of which side of the aisle, so to speak, that you fall on. I just think we've got to change that way. And I think for us as therapists, we know that. We know that we need to be able to join with people, to be able to learn how to collaborate, to learn how to engage with people that maybe we don't see the things the way they do, but being able to engage in that way is so important for our health, particularly our mental health, just speaking of that. So anyway, didn't mean to get too far off on that tangent, but I'm just so appreciative to Kathryn for what she's doing and what she started there. And again, if you'll go and check it out, Teletherapy Network. I keep wanting to say telehealth, but it's teletherapynetwork.com. And again, there'll be links here in the show notes and the show summary for you to get to that quickly. And also just a reminder, be sure and check out today's sponsors for the podcast, TherapyNotes.com. They are the leading electronic health record systems for mental health providers, particularly those of us in private practice. And if you'll go to TherapyNotes.com and use the coupon code or the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get 2 months of their services for free. And so that give you a chance just to try them out. And they've got a wonderful platform, patient portal that is also has telehealth integrated with it. And so it's just a great service. And also be sure and check out Green Oak Accounting. Julie Harris and her team will do a free consultation with you to see what your needs are around the financial side of your practice. It's all they do is they specialize in working with private practice owners, both group and solo, to help them understand the financial side and give advice where it's most needed there. So be sure and check them out, greenoakaccounting.com, and be sure and let them know that you heard about them here on this podcast. So, that's all I have for today. And be sure to, the other thing too, as I mentioned at the beginning, check out that new find of mine, Flywheel, which is a web hosting company that I've switched to for the practice of therapy and also my private practice website. And it's working so much better now. So anyway, if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/flywheel, you can find out more about them. So take care, folks. I'm so glad you've joined me. Stay healthy. Be good. Make good choices. And stay healthy. So we'll be talking to you again next week on the Practice of Therapy podcast. Oh, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. Take care, folks. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.